Trigger warning. This episode may discuss one or more of the following topics: violence, death, including that of people of Indigenous descent, war, abuse, medical issues, self-harming behaviour, eating disorder behaviour or body shaming, drug and alcohol addiction, sexual activity, hate speech or strong abusive language, discrimination, and stereotypes. These potential topics have remained part of the episode as it forms part of the interviewee's story, which cannot be accurately told without including such information. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. G'day and welcome to another episode of Spectrum Uncensored. Today I have with me JessieLea from the outer suburbs of Melbourne in Victoria. How are you?
Hey, how are you?
Not too bad. So, could you tell me a little bit about what you've been diagnosed with and when you were diagnosed?
No worries. Well, I guess if we're starting at the start, when I was about 25, I was diagnosed with CPTSD. And then later in my 20s, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, not neurodivergence, but sort of relevant to my story anyway. And then when I was 37, so last year, I was diagnosed with autism and ADHD.
Yeah, so well, that's a lot, isn't it?
I got the trifecta of neurodivergence.
Yeah, it's quite a combo. So how did kind of your diagnosis of PTSD come about? Was it something that you kind of went out of your way to get diagnosed, or was it something that you kind of did you stumble upon it by chance, or did you already know? Or
I mean, I think, it was always known that I was a traumatized, child and young person. And I guess, I guess I probably was hoping to get a firm diagnosis to actually, be able to make it real, that an element of that sort of trauma is like second guessing yourself and just thinking that there's something wrong with you rather than that you're reacting to, traumatizing circumstances. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a bit of a sidetrack, but even now, a lot of my paperwork doesn't have CPTSD on it, and I'm like, why? It affects my life I think not so much on a daily basis now, but, when I was younger, it was affecting my life daily, so why is it not being acknowledged, amongst my medical team? It seems kind of strange to me. But anyway, yeah, I think, I probably did want that... the solidity of knowing that was the reality for me. And yeah, I think that having a diagnosis with all things is actually really helpful in understanding yourself and seeking the right help.
Yeah, it's definitely like a self-discovery thing. I find my situation was very similar. I have PTSD too, and it is trauma, is abuse-induced. So, but I didn't realise, with a lot of things, I didn't realise that that's what was happening. And as I've obviously spoken about it with a psychologist and things and gone through, it's like, no, you're actually disassociating when that happens. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, and things start to come together. And then it was like that for when I was diagnosed autistic ADHD. I decided to seek it out because my son was diagnosed, but also I was trying to work out, am I acting the way I'm acting or reacting the way I'm reacting because I'm just traumatized, or is there something more to it? And I don't know if that was similar to your kind of...
Very much so, because we got to a point in my life where I had done a lot of work. I'd been in therapy for, most of my life. And after I got diabetes, that really forced me to look after myself in ways that I hadn't been able to before that. And so then I got to this point where I was like, why am I still this person that doesn't seem to fit in? I feel like I've done all this work, I'm not a constantly traumatized person anymore, but I'm still different in these ways that I can't really, pinpoint. So that really did lead
Yeah, and
me
I mean
on into,
yeah, like when you're different, there's no cure for being different. Like it's literally just how you are wired, and that's who you are. So it's almost like that. We've got that kind of it's not a stigma, but that whole sense of how do I fix this, and it's not necessarily something that's fixable, but you don't know that at the time, so you're constantly chasing some sort of cure or fix that
mm,
doesn't actually exist. It's more of
yeah.
learning to cope and strategies and
I'm
things like
trying to
that.
write a book, and it's been happening over a really long period of time. And now that I'm like reading through the bits that I'd already written, it's like, wow, oh my gosh. With hindsight, it's like, oh, there's neurodivergence, and here's some neurodivergence over here. And, it was
Yeah,
in there waiting to be picked up, but just
yeah,
hadn't been
definitely.
yet. And I think,
I'm doing a similar thing. I'm writing a book as well, and I find it very therapeutic. And
yes,
it is. There's a lot of self reflection in there, and yeah, as you're writing and you're thinking about things from this new perspective of that
mm,
you are wired differently, um, and all the rest of it. It changes things for you, and it's I feel like it's for the better since
yeah,
knowing what not what I am, but you know what I mean. Knowing who I am and why I am the way I am,
yeah,
it's empowering to know that because you can
absolutely.
really do so much with that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah, I
it's
have way better, understanding of myself now, and I am able to go a lot, be a lot gentler on myself now as well. So, and I just also feel like I think when I finally got diagnosed, I was like, all of a sudden had this fire up under my bum, because I thought I've got to get my diabetes like more under control, and then I have this one thing that's kind of sorted, and then I can like focus on what else is going on. So it did force me
yep,
once again to really be proactive about my health, which has been really really interesting. Really, I mean, every condition that I have in some way has impacted on the other and helped me, I
yeah. Well,
guess,
I remember you talking about like the comorbid kind of bits and pieces, and I can definitely relate to that because it's like that wanting routine, but then wanting impulsivity and wanting something different, and then you like go and do something impulsive and go, why did I do that? I want my routine back. And so it's like it's almost like you're in a constant state of panic of some description, no
Yeah.
matter what you're doing. So it's yeah, I don't know. It seems like you and I are very, very similar in a lot of ways. So um and it's nice to talk to people to kind of you're not alone with these
Yeah.
kinds of things, but it's just really, really nice to actually have that, you know, in front of you kind of thing and go, okay, no, it is legit. Like people aren't just saying that. Um but what was it like growing up like for you? I mean I know my childhood was complicated and things like that, but I'd just be
Absolutely. Yeah.
interested to know, what was your school life like and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, early days was quite chaotic. When I lived with my biological family, they were injecting drug users. And so there was like no stability in my life. And I went to quite a lot of different schools. I do remember, I don't know, I used to run away a lot and just be like crying in the streets. Um,
Yeah.
and then I went into foster care when I was in like grade 5. So from that age onwards, I had stability, and I also had amazing parents. My foster parents now, my parents, they're still the people that are there for me and have raised me. And I actually just yesterday got my legal name change came in, and so now my middle name is my foster parents' last name, which is the Scottish tradition
But that's
of
awesome.
taking your dad's last name as your middle name. So yeah,
Yep.
I feel very proud of that today. But yeah, they did a really good job of like going into my schools and communicating with my teachers and principals and sort of creating this scaffolding for me. So when I had my meltdowns and things, when I, wasn't coping, I was able to remove myself from the classroom and go and calm myself down and then come back when I was ready. So they had all these things in place that dealt with the things that I was dealing with. And because everyone knew I was a traumatized person, and also, our knowledge about, female or assigned female at birth people and neurodivergence has really grown just in the last few years. So, even if I wasn't a traumatized small person, I don't think that it would have been picked up on until much later. Who knows? But yeah, because of the amazing work that my parents did, I sort of, I had the room and the freedom to be myself. And yeah, so it wasn't, and also because my personal life was often quite so ongoingly traumatic, school was less traumatic because it was a place away from that. And I've been contemplating about it a lot, because it's not that I wasn't bullied, it's that I was very oblivious and in my own world anyway. I remember people, running away from me as a joke, and I'd just try and catch them, and I'd just be like trying to catch them. But eventually I'd run out of breath, and I knew what they were doing, and I'd be sad about it. But like, I also was just kind of oblivious, and I'd just go off and do my own thing or find something else. I never had one group of friends anyway. I was kind of just a floater, so I just go find someone else to play with. There was lots of things that happened that when I think back now, I'm like, I guess that was kind of bullying. But I just remember when I was younger, I always thought I could be bullied a lot worse. So I didn't really dwell on it. I don't know. And I just, I spent a lot of time on my own anyway. So I was happy to just do that.
It's almost, it's very resilient and there's that adaptability almost. And I find that it's more in neurodivergent people that are born female, that it just seems to be, I don't know if it's a hormonal thing or what, but we do seem to be a little bit more adaptable with that stuff. But I don't know, because girls can be mean. Like, it's not like girls aren't as mean as boys when it comes to bullying. I mean, anyone can be mean. But it sounds like, do you think that your parents knew that there was more than just trauma there? Do you think they knew in some sort of weird way that you were neurodivergent? Or
when you say
they just kind of went with it? Because...
When I came out with my diagnoses, they said, "Oh, we just thought you were a bit weird." That old stereotype of the weird one.
Yep.
But I thought they would scoff, and be like, "Well, we don't believe that. My brother is also autistic, and so it's very much that I thought that they would look at me and be like, well, you're not, autistic enough or something like that."
Yes.
But they have not in any way seemed to question it. And, so I feel like in some small way it probably makes a lot of sense to them as well, Yeah,
I think, I don't think my parents have had a clue, but it comes down to how people have been educated too and what they've been exposed to in their lives. I don't know about your parents, whether or not they've been exposed to some level of neurodivergence somewhere along the way, but it also just sounds like they're very accepting people, and they're just going to love you no matter what, which is a beautiful thing, because everybody deserves that. So it's really lovely to hear that you've ended up with a family that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, in the foster system, I did get lucky. I had one foster family before I ended up with my forever family, and they just, are amazing people that have stood by me through a lot. So
yeah, they definitely sound like amazing human beings. So that's really lovely. That I like to hear about happy endings, so to speak, or just happy forevers. Really, that's because I think everyone goes through a rough road at some point in their life, and And I never compare journeys, because everyone's trauma is valid and everyone's
Mm.
struggles are valid. So I don't think it's not a competition, but
Who
it's
doesn't have
I
trauma by
can't
this stage
imagine.
in our lives?
Yeah, I still can't imagine what it would have been like for you to go through that stuff. I I come from a family that, or a broken home, in that my parents got divorced when I was young, but it was never like really explosive or anything like that. I don't have any
Yeah.
memory of anything like that, so I count
Mm.
myself very lucky in that regard.
Mine was tough from day one, so that was just my normal, and I was just like, well, we'll just keep going. And I don't
Yeah,
even remember the point at which I realized that that wasn't normal for everybody. I don't really even remember having that
yep,
realization. But yeah, it was just, even when, um, you know, when I went into foster care and like things kind of, I guess, settled down in a way, my life still had this amazing way of this chaos and like just wild things happening all over the place in the background. So there was always something that I was dealing with. But I've been sort of thinking of myself as like a bit of a cockroach, because it sort of doesn't matter what happens. I'm just like, let's keep going.
you do. You find a way to bounce back, and that's really admirable too, because not everyone can, and obviously you found ways to cope with certain things, and I find that that's like one of the most important things that for any person to develop, because life can be beautiful even if it is tricky and
Mm.
difficult at times. But uh, as as you say, you seem to bounce back and everything quite readily. But how does it affect your day to day? Like, do you have any examples of maybe things that are a little bit more of a struggle than people would typically expect it to be?
I mean, the things that are a struggle that I think people don't expect is just the regular everyday today, being organized, feeding yourself. Oh my gosh, feeding yourself 3 times a
Yes.
day. I'm really struggling with that at the moment. I did manage to eat some breakfast in between of working this morning, and then I had to drop my car at the mechanic, and then I had to get home on public transport, and I managed to eat in between of that and not be late for our interview. I'm very proud of myself. But it's funny, I've got a bit of time at the moment, and so I'm slowly taking on a little bit more work. And just knowing that I have an extra 7 hours of work this week has thrown me. I'm already like pre-planning extra naps, so that I can, have enough energy, because of all this
Yeah.
extra activity. So,
Do you find though too that, like, if you had 7 hours of extra time, you'd also be panicking? Because that happens with me. I'll be like, oh, I don't have anything to do today. Now what? And I start to panic about that.
absolutely,
Or if
yeah,
I've got,
yeah. I
yeah,
absolutely crumble without structure, but then also, like, if I have a routine, like, it will take me a little while to get like into that routine and used to it. And for that period of time, people will be like, what's wrong? And I'm just like, I'm just exhausted because stuff's going to happen in the next few weeks. Like,
yeah, yeah, I can totally relate to that. Like, even yesterday, my whole day was a blur. I had an interview, but I also, like, I dropped my son to school. I ended up having to pick up a friend to take her to work at the same time, and then it was, I had to go to the post office straight after that and do this and do that. And then by the time I got to the end of the day and I picked my son up and my husband got home, I'm like, I'm so spent. Like, I don't even know what just happened. It was almost like I just hit a brick wall and I just needed to lie down.
yeah. If
It's
I add
very
like one
exhausting.
thing into my timetable, it can throw my whole week out, and I have to be really careful about how
Yeah.
I do those things.
And
Yeah.
it sounds so small and so simple, but it's really not, for people that are neurodivergent. It really is hard. And even things like I don't live in a really messy house, but I have trouble cleaning up and things like that quite often. And And then I get into that hyper focus mode of all of a sudden I want to clean. I'm like, oh, I really got to utilize this. And like everything else goes out the window. And then I panic because I didn't do any of the other things I needed to do because I decided to clean out one drawer in the kitchen.
I'm
And
struggling to even clean, like if I've got something to do, normally I'll just start cleaning instead of doing the thing I need to do. But now I just
yep.
sit there and I just look at it and I'm like, what can I do? And I'm like, there's a million things that I could do, but it's so overwhelming. And then nothing
And
gets
I'm like
done.
that
And I
too.
just sit there like, freaking out about it,
The amount of
looking at all
times
the
that there'll be something on the ground, like a little piece of garbage or something, I'm like, I could pick that up, but I don't. I walk straight past it or I walk over it. And it's like I literally could just bend down and pick that up, but I physically cannot get myself to do it. And I have like I can't understand that, but I know it's because I'm neurodivergent, but it's just so frustrating because everyone's like, just bend it down and pick it up. And it's like, I'm trying, but it's just not happening. And yeah, it's such a weird experience. And when you know why that's occurring, it makes more sense. But a lot of people look at you and go, really? That sounds like a cop out or an excuse, but it's a real thing. Like,
especially
it
when I
really
can go
is.
to work and do those things for other people, and that's fine because that's my job. But then I come home and I'm like, oh,
I caught that a lot as a kid. I had a very messy room, and mum would be like,
oh,
you spent all day at school helping them clean the classroom, but then you come home and you won't clean your own room? Like, that doesn't even make sense. Why don't you just clean up at home instead of cleaning up at school? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I
yeah,
got no answers.
yeah.
So, yeah,
And
it
my
definitely would have been
parents
nice to
tried
know.
for years to get me to do like one meal a week, and I wouldn't. And now I just don't know how to make food for myself still. And I'm like, they tried.
And it gets too hard, doesn't it? And you're just like, I just won't eat then, whatever. Like, the amount of times I
Yeah.
just go to bed without dinner because I'm like, I just can't be bothered. I just
I'm
can't.
really going through like, this long term consistent phase of like, there's nothing I want to eat. If I find something that I want to eat, like by the time I have it, I don't want it. Or it just like I'm really struggling with safe foods and
Yep.
then eating the same thing so many times that I get sick of it. Yeah, it's really, I'm struggling. And yeah, I mean, but I know like one thing diabetes has forced me to do is to feed myself regularly. And I know that if I can do that, everything else works better. So it's kind of like I really like have to just, like force myself to do the thing, do the eats, put something in the face hole because
Yep.
otherwise I know like everything else will fall apart. And I guess, yeah.
It really, that type 1 diabetes really keeps you accountable. I've got a really good friend that's got type 1 diabetes, and he lived with us for quite a long time. And I've seen him in having his lows and things like that, and literally having to
Mm,
save his life and all the rest of it. And so I know
yeah.
what kind of toll that takes on a person. I couldn't imagine
It's
having
like
it myself,
really hard
but
work. It really is. It's like
yeah, he's
non-stop.
talking to me all the time about it.
Yeah, you kind of have to think about
Yeah.
it all the time and it gets exhausting. And I have mornings sometimes, I mean, it doesn't happen very often anymore. I've had diabetes now for 10 and a half years, but sometimes I get up and I'm going about my day and then I get to the like lunchtime and I'm like, whoa, hang on a minute. I'm a diabetic. What's going on?
Yes.
Where are my sugars
Yeah.
at? Because you just,
How did
it's,
that come about?
you don't want to think about something
Finding
all
out.
the time. So it was a really chaotic time in my life. And so I was really ignoring all of the symptoms. I guess the short version of the story is that at the time I was homeless and I was living in this, like at the back of this shop that my friends owned with a friend of mine who was homeless with me. And my
Yep.
friend, his mum is diabetic and he watched her get diabetes. So he watched her go through all the symptoms. So my friend's telling me, you've got diabetes. I think you need to go to the doctor. And I'm just like, yeah, okay. You know,
Mm.
I, what was happening? I was sleeping a lot. That wasn't that unusual. I had no energy at all. That also wasn't that unusual. Because we were homeless, I have the added benefit of knowing that I was filling a 9 litre bucket. at overnight, a
Yes.
wee,
Yep.
which was not normal. This was not normal.
No.
I would go to bed, and I would wake up and there would be like empty juice bottles and stuff. I would just be waking up in the middle of the night. I was so thirsty that I would be guzzling down these juices and soft drinks. But because I couldn't process the sugar, it's all just coming straight out of me and I'm still thirsty. That's the main symptom of diabetes, really, because you can no longer process the sugar. So your body wants it, but you're not getting it. So, you're trying to get it.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I'd wake up with these empty bottles of juice and stuff next to me and this 9-litre bucket of wee. And I was just like, okay, that's kind of not normal. But it took me a few weeks before I listened to my friend and went to the doctor. So I did almost probably like kill myself in that sense. By the time I went to the doctor,
Yeah.
they just tested my blood sugar and said, you need to go straight to hospital. And I was in hospital for a few weeks.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And I think my friend that's got diabetes, he was diagnosed because he lost a bunch of weight, like practically overnight. He just he just sweated out.
Yeah.
Like, all this water, and he had like no water left in his body, and all of a sudden, was like, oh, what's happening here? And he's told me the story about his mum thinking that his mum induced the diabetes because one day he got caught eating a cookie out of a jar or something, and as punishment she made him eat the entire jar of cookies, and so she just lives with this with this
Funny,
whole guilt of,
people will say, oh, did you eat too many lollies when you were a kid? And it's like, well, that's not really how diabetes works. But it's funny because when I lived with my biological dad, he would go and get food from the Salvation Army and come home with a car full of lollies. And so quite often there was only lollies in the house. But no, that is not why I've got diabetes. Another interesting thing about that is that for a long time I couldn't afford to get the dental work that I needed done. And I had gum disease, which led to periodontal disease, which, I couldn't, which is even more expensive to get treated. And because most of my life has been impacted by being in the low socioeconomic bracket, and I couldn't do anything about it for years, it's quite likely that untreated periodontal disease led to type 1 diabetes. So if that's not a good argument for putting the dental on Medicare, I don't know what is.
Yeah. Well, especially if it's going to affect...
I'd be costing the government a lot more with diabetes because everything is subsidised and,
it's NDSS, isn't it? I think. Yeah.
So, if they hadn't just subsidised my dental treatment in the first place.
Yeah. And do you use I know my friend's got a device that's connected to his skin. Is that what you use? You were saying before you think your device might end up beeping?
I guess I can show you. I've got a pump and there's a needle in my skin and so this delivers me insulin.
Okay.
And I have another device just here which is testing my blood sugar and they talk to each other every 5 minutes. So as my, that's, I guess, as close to a pancreas as it can get. So as my, blood sugar goes up and down, it just checks it and gives you a little bit of an adjustment and tries to keep the
really
sugars.
Cool. I haven't seen one like that before.
Okay,
My friend's got one. I can't remember what it's called now. A Dexcom, maybe something like that.
Yeah, that's what I've got,
Yeah, but he doesn't. He has to do his own insulin. He has to use his meter, do the reading. But that seems more like is it more of a kind of set and forget kind of thing?
It is,
just
and it's
naturally
amazing. I feel like
that's
I've
really
gotten
cool,
lazy in some ways though, because I just there's things now that I don't have to think about all the time, and so then I forget about them.
But that's good because when you're neurodivergent on top of everything else, the last thing you want to do is forget to do something and then just die. It's kind of kind of important, but it just kind of puts your mind at ease a little bit knowing that really it's kind of taken care of. Yeah, wow. Well, I'm going to have to mention that to my mate because I don't know if he's heard of that before, so he'll probably listen to this episode. But that's very, very cool. So it's definitely learning something every time I speak to somebody new. So honestly, I remember one thing I'm loving about it.
When I got diagnosed, I remember thinking, I'm going to be going through this for the rest of my life. And it really didn't occur to me that within 10 years' time, there would be all this, I'd be hooked up to all this technology that's doing all this work for me. On one hand, feel so grateful to technology. And then now, on the other hand, I feel like beholden to it because I need it to work all the time now.
Yeah, that's one thing that my mate's been saying as well. Is like if it fails, then it's like, oh, now what? Because
Yeah,
you get so reliant on it, and
yeah,
it's definitely a catch-22, isn't it, with technology?
yeah,
I feel that's the way with anything in this world now. The banks go down and you can't access your money, so you can't buy your food,
yeah.
and all the rest of it is just a very big knock-on effect with everything. So I guess we'll finish up with, have you got any advice for anyone that is undiagnosed but suspects that they have something like, obviously we've talked about your diabetes and neurodivergence, but do you have any kind of advice for anyone that thinks maybe but isn't doing much about it, really?
So I'm just sneakily looking at my notes about this.
I mean, you've definitely covered a lot. Like, I know you've said, like, get checked because, like, your life could depend on it. Definitely in the diabetes situation.
Absolutely. But with neurodivergence, though, um, well, I reckon if you think that you are, then you probably are. I've heard, but I haven't confirmed this, that there's some research out there that says that if you think that you're, neurodivergent, autistic, or ADHD, then you probably are. Because if you weren't, you wouldn't really be thinking about that in the first place as well, I think was the
Yeah.
kind of gist of that research.
Like, you're more in
But
tune with that.
yeah, and you wouldn't really be worrying about that because I just, I
Yeah.
guess if you're neurotypical, you just would, I don't know. I don't even know how to explain that. But
Yeah,
apparently,
everything's normal. Like, everything's normal if you're neurotypical. I know what you mean.
you wouldn't be
Yeah.
questioning that.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I
but
think we do. We
my
know ourselves well.
understanding is that the neurodivergent community embraces you whether you have a professional or a self-diagnosis, So get involved with the online community because they are like amazing, really welcoming and accepting and a great place to get information. Getting a diagnosis can be hard and time consuming and it is out of reach for some people. I've been really lucky because I've been so poor my whole life that a lot of the professional people in my life have really gone out of their way to help me out. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be in the position that I'm in, I'm definitely not like out here with resources to throw at things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I guess, I've been uniquely positioned that I've been very helped my whole life. Otherwise, I think I'll probably still be sitting on the edge of my bed thinking, am I autistic? I think I could be autistic.
I think, as you say, with the word lucky, it's not so much that, is it? We kind of use that word because we don't know what to use, but it's more just like, I mean, the human rights. We all have a right to be healthy and be safe and happy and feel
Mm,
loved and, and
yes.
nurtured and all that kind of thing. So it's not, it's definitely
We
not
know
down
what
to
people
luck,
need,
but
so I feel strongly about this because we know what people need, and the government chooses to allow large amounts of people to not have what they need. And I just think we're living in a society that tells you that you have the potential to be whatever you want and thrive, but we're not actually providing people with the foundations for what they need to thrive. And I think that needs to change, but I don't know
definitely,
quite how to
yeah.
make
And
that
I feel
happen.
like this year, yeah, I don't know about down in Victoria, but up here in Queensland, that's changing quite a bit this year. There's been a lot more inclusivity seen and a lot more like awareness spread about things and more talk about people with disabilities and, what it should look like for them and how do we include them in everything that society has to offer, kind of thing. So I definitely think we're moving forward with it. It's definitely not as
Yeah.
fast as I'd like because, we're so behind as it is. But yeah, you make a good point that they don't practice what they preach. They'll
Mm.
they'll be like, it's all talk, no walk. So they definitely need to pull their fingers out and do something about it because there are a lot of us in the community. So
Mm.
um, yeah,
Well, yeah, and
definitely.
I think neurodivergence is potentially like equally as common as being neurotypical. But does that mean that we're not disabled? No, it doesn't, because the whole of society is built for neurotypical people. And until, it's made more inclusive and accessible, we are going to be disabled by the community.
Definitely. And it's been really nice. I've been speaking to a lot of people, and I'm really excited because some of the previous interviews have been speaking with professionals that help with those kinds of things, like everything from employment to just getting out in the community, and how they're kind of holding people accountable, like employers and things like that, to be like, well, actually, no, it's up to you to make sure that this environment is friendly for everybody, not just for neurotypical people, but neurodivergent people too. About 50% of the disabled population doesn't have a job. And it's not because they don't want to work. It's just that they physically can't because the environment is not environmentally, like, it's not friendly for them. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. That's for me, like stuff
yeah,
around employment. I got deep fears around stuff to do with employment, and I've been doing disability support work for 22 years. And, I feel like, wow, yeah, in another year and a bit, I'm gonna have a master's of social work. I'm way overqualified for the job that I'm doing, but I can't seem to convince anyone else to give me a different job. So, just rolling with it at the moment because I am good at what I do and I love the people that I work with. But now that I know that I'm neurodivergent and I see the stats around employment, and I think, well, far out, I fit into these things. But then I think my whole vibe is that over my course of my whole life, I've been able to smash a lot of stereotypes and statistics. So I guess this is just going to have to be one more that I go for.
yeah. And I think too, I don't know about you, but I do a lot of masking and stuff like that. So we do that a lot in every kind of situation. But it sounds, a lot of neurodivergent people are generally in a job that helps other neurodivergent people. That is something that I'm seeing a massive trend in. Um,
Yeah.
and that doesn't necessarily say that we're, we fit into a particular mold. I think that we genuinely care about each other and we want to see
Mm.
each other succeed.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit different from the neurotypical world where people are stepping over each other to try and get to the top. I feel like we're more united.
Yes.
And people, I've heard myths like, oh, people who are neurodivergent don't feel love and don't feel this and don't feel that. And it's like, well, that's not true. We have a
I
different way of
feel
showing it maybe, but
way more deeply generally.
yeah, it's intense. It is very
Mm.
intense. Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. We feel everything more intensely than the average Joe. But well, thank you very much for popping in and having a chat with me.
No
Um,
worries. Thank you for the opportunity.
yeah, it was really lovely to hear your story, and you're inspirational, and like I feel like you're kind of a soul sister now. We're very very similar, but yeah, I'm so glad that yeah you really. It sounds like you're kicking a lot of goals, and
Thank
no
you.
one's going to get in your way. So that's awesome. So thank you very much for popping in and having a chat.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Have a great
No,
day.
you too. Take care.